This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
On Tuesday evening, October 23, 1956, a day which the world will be slow to forget, a boy of 18 interrupted his work on the early evening shift and entered the foreman's office in the locomotive factory on Kobányai Street in the Hungarian capital of Budapest. "You must attend more meetings of the Communist Study Group," his foreman warned him abruptly. Because the boy was young, he was tempted to argue back. But something in the foreman's cold stare warned him, and he accepted the reprimand. Outside the office, he thought, "I work 10 hours a day and don't get enough food. Why should I have to attend communist meetings after work?" He was a handsome youth, blond, straight, gray-eyed, and with a skin that was spotted for the time being, but which seemed to be clearing up as he approached manhood. He wore cheap corduroy pants, a very cheap windbreaker with a zipper that rarely worked, and heavy, warm shoes. In his locker he had a stiff overcoat that was not warm, and a cap. Apart from one very thin Sunday suit at his father's, those were all the clothes he owned, although he had worked for nearly 4 years. Bad food, trolley fare, and a little money to help his father accounted for all his wages, which were pitifully low. Joseph Tot had no mother. She had died 2 years before, mysteriously, and her death had been not only a family tragedy, but an economic hardship as well. It had happened this way. His mother was a big, jovial, talkative woman who could never resist a joke, and one of the reasons why her son Joseph had such a ready smile was his long acquaintance with this warm-hearted woman. But one day she had said, sitting in a casual group which had been having supper in her home, "Everywhere you look, you see the Russian flag. I long for the old Hungarian flag." Someone in the group that night, some trusted friend, had sought temporary advantage in Budapest's bitter struggle for food by reporting Mrs. Tot to the AVH, Államvédelmi Hatóság, State Protecting Organization, who were generally known as the AVO, Államvédelmi Osztály, State Protecting Special Group, which had originally been a highly selected group within the AVH. Next day, a small truck called at the Tot home, and 2 AVO agents hauled Mrs. Tot away. Nobody saw her for 6 months, and when she returned home, the terror of her situation became apparent. She smiled and assured her family that nothing had happened to her while she was in the hands of the AVO. Resolutely, she met all queries with one reply: nothing happened. But when she fell sick from the exhaustion, starvation, and torture she had suffered in prison, and when it became apparent that she was certainly going to die, she let drop a few hints. Not enough to imperil the safety of her family should there happen to be another unsuspected spy in its midst, but enough to give her son Joseph some idea of what had happened. Once she said to him, "I had to stand on one foot for hours every day." That was all she told him, but the look of terror on her face was unforgettable. Soon she was dead. Young Joseph tried standing on one foot for 15 minutes, and he was not plump the way his mother had been before she entered prison. Even so, the pain quickly became unbearable, and he could not imagine how his mother could have stood that way for hours. Now, as he left the foreman's office, he kept his thoughts to himself, for no one knew who the AVO men in the factory were. They were there, of that he was sure, for a man down the line from him had said some time ago, "This damned wrench, it must be a Russian wrench." For this, the man had been spirited away, badly beaten, and sent back to work. Joseph also knew of a man in his mother's village, outside of Budapest, who had fallen behind in his taxes. Unfortunately, he mentioned to friends that he had a brother in America, and the AVO heard of this and gave the villager 6 weeks to get the money from America. And when he failed, he was dragged off, and nobody ever saw him again. The strange thing was that there was no speculation as to what had happened to the taxpayer, because even a logical guess, if reported to the AVO, might cause a man to be horribly beaten. So it was better just to keep one's mouth shut.